Hello, Lexi here with KelownaNow, and I'm sitting down with Brad and Brody from LUX Homes, and we are gonna have, I'm not a debate, a little conversation about should we renovate or should it be a new custom build. So let's start off easy. What are some key factors like a homeowner should consider when they're deciding to renovate or rebuild?
Well, I think the big thing for renovations versus rebuild is one comes down to your budget, two, your location, three, kind of what your plans are, and does your current house kind of fit that, and your timeline as well. When I speak about the timeline, a renovation could potentially go a little bit quicker with an addition on your house versus building brand new. Some people really like the areas that they live. A new custom home that we could build with a new lot uh, might be a little bit smaller of a lot than what you currently sit on if you sit in an older neighborhood. So you can potentially keep that big yard space that you have and build a brand new house on it.
Yeah, I think that covers it.
I'm like looking
I
at
don't
you.
really
Like,
have anything
I'm
to
like,
add to
come on,
that.
Brody, you have got something. Okay, so I'm a homeowner. I have an older home. Would it be cheaper? And I know you can't fully say this, and we can't get too crazy about numbers and money, but like, depending, I guess, on the situation, like, should I rebuild or should I completely just gut? Like, how do you start making those? Like, is that a perfect time for someone to come see you guys and say, this is what I want, and should I rebuild or should I just renovate?
I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into a renovation versus a rebuild. So the biggest one would be if you're talking knock the house down that you're on and then rebuilding it. I mean, that's obviously going to be more expensive than just having a new lot and building a new home because you have a demolition cost that's included in that. Other big factors, like Brad kind of mentioned about making up your mind about renovating or new build, is do you love the area you're in? Do you love the lot you're in? Does the house structure have what you need to grow into it? Or is it something where you're going to add a bunch of rooms on, try to add a bunch of space? Those are all kind of factors that go into the overall cost. Some of the things like, does your house have asbestos in it, can drive up the cost of a renovation. But if you're doing like some updates and you're not moving walls and you're not adding space, it can be super beneficial to update a bathroom, update a kitchen, update some flooring, update some paint, and those small updates can be much more cost effective than getting into a full-on gut. But overall, there are so many factors that go into a renovation. It's hard to really just say like, oh yeah, renovate your house or knock your house down. We've had some fairly substantial renovations that clients did ask us when we were pricing them out, like, are we getting to the point where we should consider knocking it down? And it's like, well, if you're going to knock the house down and then rebuild it on this lot, that's going to double the cost because you've got a demolition, you've got a foundation, but everything structurally was okay, and we ended up gutting it. We've had other clients where they look at it and they say, like, for how big this renovation is, I'm not actually adding any square footage to the home. I think I'll still outgrow the home with the size of my family and the age of the kids. I think we'll still want more space down the road. And then they made the decision ultimately to list their house and look for a bigger house in a more favorable neighborhood. So
I've had a house in the past that we renovated, and they actually wanted to rip it down and start fresh with a new one. But we started looking into the zoning bylaws and the way the house was situated on the lot, and how close it was to the lake, that realized we weren't even able to rebuild a house where the existing one was. So that's what drove our clients at that point. We just gutted the whole house and renovated, and even that, getting those permits was a process in itself. But for like the costing and stuff that you're asking about, that's why we do those preliminary building agreements where we actually go in and we design everything and work with your finishes and kind of price out where everything's going to end up. And we can give you a rough budget on what a new house might cost, and like the playground we kind of play in for finishes to help you make those decisions. But I believe that if you're renovating, it's great to hire a design build firm like ours, because we can, after you engage us, we can go in your house and kind of look around and see where some major structure issues could potentially be from our experience, and kind of give you a heads up for a worst case scenario if we did run into this, right? So usually when we're pricing stuff, and Brody can maybe answer this a bit better because he does all the pricing. But when he's pricing, if you ask us to do a bathroom and a kitchen, we hire out EPOC consulting to come and do an asbestos test, like he mentioned. But he's also looking at all the electrical too. He knows that because we're upgrading, we should be upgrading the electrical, so we don't have to do it again and worry about that aspect and the plumbing and stuff that goes in there as well. But what we can account for is when we run into like structural issues that are covered up. Yeah.
Yeah, those are the hidden factors that you never really know what you're going to run into. We've had renovations where we've opened up walls and gotten wood rot behind them. It's not something that, oh, now we should have knocked it over, but they're unseen, hazards of a renovation that kind of make for the adventure. As Brad mentioned with our preliminary agreements, as we're pricing a house too, sometimes it can pump the brakes quickly on a plan for a renovation if we go in and we find, asbestos, vermiculite, lead. Once we kind of price out that cost of this is what it would cost to remediate the home of all the hazardous material, suddenly that's half the budget of your overall renovation. We've had situations too where, a client wanted to remove a wall and do a kitchen renovation. We tested the material. We found that it had asbestos in it. And then they just kind of said, you know what, if that's the factor, they had the means that they just said, if we've got to spend that much money just to do our kitchen, why don't we consider a full renovation? And then with our preliminary build agreement, we can kind of walk them through that whole process. So it's X amount to do the asbestos. So now you want to go further with it. Well, we're going to add this in. And, that overall price tag just keeps kind of building. And that's all done before we enter a construction agreement so that you can kind of know where you're at. And then they have the decision to just say, okay, it's getting out of hand. Let's not do that. But that client in particular, they did all their windows. So we had to test all their siding. All their siding had asbestos in it. So now you're looking at re-siding the home. You're looking at re-drywalling the home, re-insulating the home. Then you go the next step, bring the house up to code with electrical, with plumbing, with insulation. It really kind of snowballs. And if you do that all before you enter a construction agreement, you kind of have the freedom to just, back out or
decide if let's just rebuild
You
or
know,
move or sell.
I think the big thing with our preliminary building agreement when we're talking about the costing is you get a real sense of what your project's going to cost in a timeline versus somebody's coming and saying, you say I have a budget of 50 grand. It's like, I can give you a kitchen for 50 grand or a bathroom for 50 grand. But nobody's taking into account all the other stuff. We can sit there, we can think and talk to you. If you're only renovating your main floor, what are your future plans if you have a floor above you or below you? Because does it make sense to run some wires that aren't connected to your panel yet, but for future, so you're not ripping stuff up? It's just kind of some of the experience that we have that can help you in the future for future renovations, for costing as well.
That's smart. So you're saying that, here I am, I might just want to do a kitchen renovation, but you might come in and actually be like, hey, Alexa, but, if you're going to stay in this home, you probably want to eventually renovate this space and this space. Kind of like looking at it a full picture. And
we definitely try to look at the full picture and get your whole plans there. Like, we want you guys to be honest with us, and we want to be honest with you as well when we're doing this, so we can give you the best advice we can. And we also are not going to buy a job if we think it's going to be more than the 50 grand. We'll tell you right up front, because there's nothing worse than saying, hey, it actually costs $75,000. That's why I believe big time in these preliminary building agreements. And if you ask the majority of people who have built or renovated before, and you gave them that option of doing a preliminary building agreement ahead of time, I bet you 90% or more would say that's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah. It's funny you bring up a kitchen. We got hired to remove a wall for a kitchen reno that had already been planned. They had their own kitchen designer come in, design a kitchen. They just wanted to know if we could remove a wall, if it was structural, or if there'd be any issues with that. And then they hired us to remove that wall. Then things kind of snowballed. They asked about taking two windows and combining them into one window. That, it was a lake house, so they wanted to capitalize on that view out the window. It was a log home, so removing that exterior wall turned into a factor, and then the engineering turned into a factor. And then once we started the job, the floor was buckling. It was an inch and a half out of level across 10 feet. So then, we started pulling that up. We found that there was a bunch of ducting that wasn't connected properly within the floor. So then that kind of
Oh my
was
goodness.
addressed, and like
Rodents.
there was
Oh.
rodents. So then we sealed the house up. We re-insulated. Things snowballed, but that was a job where they had hired us without a preliminary agreement.
Yeah.
And then as we started doing the work that they requested, things started coming up, and we still would price them out and give them the, your floor joists are buckling. We need to address this. Here's our expected cost. Do you want to move forward with it? And then it turned into, it started as something small where they were doing one window, and it was, well, if you're doing one window, this house is 60 years old. You're going to have one brand new window on your main floor. It's not going to match any of the other windows.
Yeah.
Have you thought of doing, and then they were open to that.
I would say that example, that's a thing what I call scope creep, right? When they hire you to do one thing and the whole thing wasn't properly, I'd say fully planned out to what they wanted to do. They're great people and they just wanted to get going on this stuff. So we kind of went down that path, and, it did take a bit, because if we don't have the time to do, like Brody's saying, mention all those conversations and the proper planning, we're planning as we build. So there'd be, a week delay between a trade getting in there because of that stuff. So I think it just reiterates how important that agreement is, whereas it's not just the price, but also that timeline that we can give you.
Mm-hmm.
We can properly schedule our trades to just keep going on your house and working to get it back to you.
Yeah, that kitchen designer wasn't a big fan, because when we started the job, it was, let's just pull this one wall out and then, we'll be in there next month. And then they called and confirmed the schedule, and it was like, oh, yeah, we're going to be 3 or 4 months now. Like, we've got no floor, we've got a wall getting pulled out, we've got all these windows that we've ordered. But I mean, in the end, it still came together and was a fantastic renovation. So
I think people really just don't realize. I mean, it's like, I think I asked you guys in a different episode, like about Pinterest and like just, I think as females, a lot of time are the ones pushing design or what they want, or like, why can't I have this? But you really have to think about like the inside of the walls, like, especially if you're in an older home, like there's a lot of things that can, like the snowball effect, you open that wall, but it could cause this. So I think that's why it's so important coming to you guys at Lux Homes, because you can help at least give those options. Like, okay, if you want to renovate, it sounds like if you want to renovate, we can do this, X, Y, and Z, and these are our recommendations. But you can also see if maybe it's better off just rebuilding. But you're dealing with so many different permits and like things that go way over my head that I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I need help. So that's amazing. And it sounds like just, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So let's go talk to Lux Homes, because they can help you, because I'm overwhelmed.
I mean, it can be
I'm
overwhelming,
overwhelmed.
and even especially when it comes to major renovations or demolition renovations, we rely on professionals to kind of guide us through some of those permitting issues and setback issues, and sometimes you've got to go in for development permits, and we hire people that help guide us through that whole process, and it's all transparent. So we keep our clients in the loop, and we kind of guide them through it and let them know the status and timelines, and it really is, I mean, every renovation's a bit of an adventure. I always say that, and I always just tell people you can't let the adventure stop you. So
Yeah. We've kind of naturally snowballed into a lot of the questions I did have, but how does building a custom home offer more design flexibility compared to renovating? We kind of touched about it, but if we can.
I'd say it's a blank slate you're starting with. Really, your only restrictions are your budget and I guess how big of a footprint you can have on your lot. a custom home, we're able to give you, I think, more accurately a price too, because we're starting fresh, so we know kind of where we're going with everything. And um, yeah, it's just kind of easier to build and plan. I believe a custom home, a renovation is a different beast in itself. There's a lot of, we have to rely on a lot of our knowledge that we've had of past of working with houses in that age. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, the only real unknown on a new build is generally your excavation and your foundation work. Once it's kind of out of the ground, it's pretty clear sailing. When you're designing a house versus renovating a house, you can pick and choose the features that you want to include and you don't want to include. Um, Everybody has different tastes. So if you're moving into a house that somebody's owned before, somebody designed, even a new house, there can be things about it that you don't really like, but you are okay stomaching or you're okay putting up with. And then maybe one day I'll renovate this, and then you come in to try to renovate this house.
It's not as easy.
And you're trying to create bedrooms, you're trying to eliminate bedrooms and add bathrooms. And it's not always just as cut and dry as like, oh, there's a bathroom here, we'll just tie it in. There's so many factors to think about: floor joist direction, the size of the plumbing that's feeding the wastewater, venting. Like, there's a lot of factors that go into it that make a renovation. You really are sometimes trying to fit a round peg in a square peg in a round hole, square peg in a round hole, right? So,
And I know it's not like a lot of the questions I'm asking, it's like it depends, and every house is different. But generally, is a renovation timeline shorter than a custom home, or is that a myth?
I think that kind of depends on the scope of work, but I believe that if you're just doing a straight reno on your house and there's some demo involved and maybe some reframing of the roof or whatever, your renovation should be done quicker than a custom build, because when you are building a new custom home, you got the excavation you have to go through, your foundation work, all your backfill and all the stuff to get to that point, perimeter drainage. Versus if you're doing a reno and you're not touching the foundation or anything, you sped it up by 6 to 8 weeks at that point. So you should be able to get in faster. There could be some demo work that'll eat into that as well, but then you also offset that with you're not as framing as much. So you're could be again 4 to 8 weeks or longer for framing that you're saving. So I believe that a renovation is a quicker process to get your end product.
yeah, if you were to take like say you're doing a 3,000 square foot home and you're completely gutting it right down to the wood studs, and then you're doing a 3,000 square foot new build, the renovation, like Brad said, as long as you're not touching any of the exterior walls, even if you're doing exterior finishes new, you've already got a structure in place. You can move interior walls around here and there. The renovation generally is going to be quicker because it's a lot easier to demo something when nothing's getting saved than it is to dig a hole, build a foundation, backfill a hole. And then not to mention the permit process too. A new build permit can be, 8 to 12 weeks turnaround.
A long time.
A renovation permit, depending the district you're in or the city you're in, can be a lot quicker turnaround, as long as you're not jeopardizing the structure.
I'd say that one nice thing too about renovations is usually if a client's lived in the home for a long time, they really know what they want out of that home when they're done, right? They've seen their kids grow up or their kids are growing up and they've been always sitting there, I want to do this, I want to do the kitchen, I want to put an addition on there. So they really know exactly how they want that house to look. They've had a vision for it for multiple years, right?
I sometimes forget that some people, like I've moved around a lot, so I haven't been in a home very long, so I'm not really attached to a house. But there are people out there that have lived in their homes their whole life, like they've raised their kids. So yeah, I guess when you're thinking renovating that house that you have history or legacy on, I guess emotion definitely comes into it.
I mean, on that point, I know people that grew up in the house they're in and then they bought it from their parents and are still living in it to this day, right? So that's 30, 40 years of living in a house. Like that's a long time. So you can definitely become emotionally attached to them for sure. There's all those memories that you've had in them.
Yeah, I mean, even we did a project where it was a full renovation, the full main floor. We moved walls, we made it more open concept. The clients had lived in the home previously, and then they bought a second home, had it as a rental, and then they decided to move back into it. And like seeing their faces change when they're thinking about what it looked like when they lived in it before to what it looks like now, was a pretty cool experience. Like hearing the stories that they had from the original home, it was pretty funny.
So, Brad, you just actually went through a renovation. Can you talk about why you chose to renovate your house and the experience in that?
The experience was great because I hired a great contractor. That's all I have to say about that one.
Yeah.
No, I chose to renovate the home mainly because we got the house for so cheap. It just kind of made sense for us to renovate it. It wasn't an older house. We just kind of changed it around to kind of meet my family's needs. I kind of walked in and I had a vision of what I needed. I really wanted to separate the kids from myself. So I gave them a play area downstairs and myself a man cave. Unfortunately, if I'm in the man cave, my daughter likes to bring all her toys into the man cave and pile them up in front and then asks me to play with her. And if I don't, she yells in my face.
So
or if I
Kenzie cave.
Yeah, if I go upstairs, the toys come upstairs. My boy, he's turning 8 this year, so he's kind of separating himself from us now, so he doesn't mind his space down there. But we just kind of brought it in. We had a vision. I had a vision for separating, having different areas in the house, right? So
different entertaining spaces.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I feel like Michelle's the one we should really bring in to ask how that renovation was.
Yeah.
And whose needs were met, because the ensuite bathroom, I feel like, is Michelle's needs were met 100%. And the man cave was your needs.
Well, it sounds like the perfect renovation. And
I got a spot for my smoker outside too, so I'm happy about that, right? So
it's all about kind of your lifestyle, but you can't have it all, right? Like you're missing things at your house still to this day now. Like
there's no lake.
Yeah, there's no lake. I don't have the lake view anymore.
But you sacrifice for you.
You do sacrifice. I mean, it came down to, like we were talking about there, the cost to build new or to renovate. And we were thinking about building a new house, and this house just magically wasn't even looking. A friend sent it to us, and they're like, "Oh, if I had the money, I'd buy this." And I was like, "Well, if you're not putting an offer, I'm going to." And I put an offer on it, and we went in there, we were able to fix it up. The basement wasn't finished either, right? So we had that aspect of it, and yeah.
I think one thing too that we haven't really touched on is that how long are you going to stay in this house? I mean, like the renovation you did on that house turned it into a bit of a forever home for you, where you can picture your kids growing up. You can picture your kids getting old there, moving out of the house.
I can picture them moving out.
Yeah. I mean, that is a big factor. If someone says like, "Oh, I want to rental my house, we've got a 10-year plan to upgrade," that really is going to, are you going to get the value out of this renovation that you're going to put into it? If someone comes to us and says like, "I want to be here 25 years. My kids are young and they're going to grow old and move out, and that's when we think we're going to, update our house or move on, upgrade." Those are all factors to consider when it comes to the value of the renovation you're about to do. It doesn't really make sense to drop a considerable amount of money into a house if you think in 5 years I'm going to sell this house.
Okay, I was going to ask you that. I was like, is there value of like someone being like, okay, I want to make this house better and I want to just sell it and try and make a profit? Like,
I think that's tough nowadays with the new rules from the government for flipping. Anyways, unless you're in that industry.
Didn't know that.
I think we always tell people when they come in, like Brody just mentioned, like, is it for you or what is your plan for the house? Because if it's for you and it's going to cost you an extra 10 or 15 grand, I think it's worth it, right? Because this is something that you spend a lot of time in. So I don't always look at stuff for the resale factor. Like we mentioned with my place, like maybe I didn't have to do my man cave the way I did, but it's a good place for me to go and get away. And it's what I wanted to do, right? It's my one splurge. So
it's your one?
I'm in that
I feel like you
the smoker zone.
I'm in a midlife crisis, I think, right now, maybe. So
It's not fair because we know Brad personally.
Yeah.
So, it's the house I didn't renovate when we did this stuff wasn't for the next family to have. It was for my family, and that's what suits us, right? So we always try to have clients when we're talking to them kind of go through that as well. Is it for you guys? Is it for somebody else? And what is your long-term plan for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, right?
Yeah, and that shouldn't scare people off of doing a renovation or planning a renovation because, sometimes people are just like, I want to live here 3 more years, but I want it to be more comfortable than it is now, like more functional than it is now. And I also want to keep resale value in mind. So, some of the product you put into a house, you might not put in stuff that's going to last 20 years without needing to be updated. You might put something in that is going to look fine for the next 5 to 10 years, but then isn't going to cost an arm and a leg, and you'll still get your money out of it if you choose to sell in that time frame.
Awesome. What would your final advice if we have someone listening that's like, oh, I need to renovate, I want to renovate, I want a new home. What would be your final advice to someone like a homeowner who's torn between the two?
I would say talk to design build companies. I think there's big value in that. If you come to us, because we do the design, we have all the trade partners, all the professionals, because we can, once you engage with us and we get into a contract for that preliminary build agreement, we can go through and start looking at potential issues you might have with a renovation. And we are able to produce you a set of drawings and a specification package to go along to help you sell yourself on the dream that you want. And you get that final price in the schedule. So I think it's, a design build company that can give you that price and you know what you're going to get at the end of that project versus just a random budget somebody throws out there and nobody's talked about finishes. They just say, I want mid-grade finishes. What does mid-grade even mean to somebody, right? Yeah. What is high end to one person versus the next person, right? So it's always good to have all that stuff documented, I think.
Yeah, I would say the biggest factor is the planning stage. The amount of people we've talked to about renovation specifically, because they're so wide open and, doing your due diligence and planning that project. We've had clients who come in with an interior design done without really understanding the cost of that package that they present to us. And then we take it and we have to chop it up and try to make it fit within their budget. And just like the allowances, it's okay to work with allowances, but have those allowances tied to a product so that you actually know what that allowance looks like. We've heard tons of times, oh, this was my budget and I had these allowances, and then I went out to actually start picking a product to fit into that allowance, and I quickly realized, the products that I was kind of forced into buying were not the grade of product that I thought I was getting when I signed this agreement. So we like to do things where everything is planned. We don't like to use allowances. We like full transparency in where the goalposts are, present you a schedule, and kind of let you decide from there if you want to enter a construction agreement. So
the allowance thing, I feel like should be a swear word in construction. Just because I feel like it's how somebody can buy a job from a client. And, like Brody's kind of example there, I always use flooring. Like, is your allowance for laminate flooring, vinyl plank, hardwood, or for plywood that's just painted red or something, right? Yeah. So it's always those final finishes that people have to sacrifice on because they went over budget on the framing or the concrete work, and nobody's ever happy with that at the end.
Yeah. I kind of feel like, and what it sounds like, we need to plan, and I'm a planner and I love planning and doing the homework before, but sometimes you guys might be seen maybe by a client, like not the bad guy, but at first you're trying to protect them but at first they're like, what do you mean I can't have this? What do you mean I can't have this? But you're really trying to help people not get over their head with like overspending and making sure that you're not, or you're having to sacrifice and then you end up with something that you're not happy with.
Let me defend myself. I am not the bad guy. It's Brody.
I am 100%
the bad guy.
So I deliver the tough news of like, I don't, that's why it's funny because when you talk budgets with people, people think like, oh, if I tell you my budget's $250,000, you're going to tell me the build's $250,000. And it's like,
Yeah.
that is true. Like, but I also find that if I save you $10,000 somewhere, you're going to end up spending it somewhere else. So like, if I tell you, I don't think you can afford this feature that you're asking me to price out, and you just tell me you want it, and it's really because your budget is 300,000 and you just didn't want to tell me that, it makes it a lot harder on
Yeah.
our end when we're planning your job, because I have these conversations where it's, you know, it's not I don't think you can afford it, it's I don't think this will fit in your budget.
Yeah.
I
So
think on that note, like it's really good to find a contractor that you have that can have that honest and open relationship with, because you want us or like Brody talking to be open and honest about everything. And it's not that he's telling you no, you can't afford it.
Mhm.
He's going off of the number that you gave, correct, Brody?
Yeah.
Right. So he's looking at your whole budget of if it was 250,000, and he's trying to fit everything in there. But now you've taken a right hand turn and you say you want this custom feature there, and he's like, you can't afford it.
Yeah.
We're trying to keep you here. So what is your budget? Yeah. But on the budget, it's always good on a renovation just to have, you know, a 10 to 20% contingency in case you do run into the structural issues that Brody
Yeah.
brought up earlier on, right?
Yep. Yeah, you don't want to be maxed out on what you can spend or borrow, because then if you're halfway through and you run into something, you know, that can really, now you're cutting things to try to get the structure back up to where you need it.
I think a good thing to point out here too is like Brody's role is to, you know, plan your project so that gets you your schedule and price out your project, make sure all your specs are correct. He's very OCD and looking at all the specs and everything, making sure everything's planned out, making sure what you want and we're getting quotes for is all lined up. So he's always in there in that budget looking at stuff and making sure that at the end of the day we're delivering the product that you can afford to pay for, you want to pay for, and that we promise that we're going to give to you.
And there's just and there's so many details that go into it that, you know, little costs that you don't really think about when you're planning a renovation. And it's kind of my job to make sure those are all thought of, and then make sure you're aware of, okay, this is the door handle you're getting, this is the door stop you're getting, you know, this is the trim that goes on the door, this is the paint color of the door. That's just a door. You know, the amount of decisions that need to be made. Is it solid? Is it hollow? Hinge color.
A lot of detail to it.
There's just a lot, and it can be overwhelming. That's one thing that, like a new build or a renovation, the planning phase can be overwhelming. But we find it just leads into a smoother schedule because those decisions don't have to be made on the fly, and they don't have to be made with a timeline of I need to know this by the end of next week, 2 weeks from now, and then you're going to delay your project because if I don't have answers, I can't move forward. So those are the types of things where we like to plan everything out, price everything out, build a schedule. You know where the finish line is, and you just go for it. Once you start construction, it's fairly smooth sailing. And then on the term of allowances, you know, we still allow you to do selection. So if construction starts and you find a different flooring that you love, you know, we already have a product that has been chosen.
Yeah.
So we have a dollar figure for that product. It's very easy for us to just say like, oh, you want to change products, here's the cost of that change, or here's the savings of that change. It goes both ways.
It does work both ways, because sometimes the product that we've chosen a year ago is no longer available, like tile or flooring or whatever. Even though when you sign your construction contract, we checked it's available, we issue the PO. For some reason, sometimes it doesn't get ordered right away, and you might have to make that change as well, right, throughout the project.
Yeah, so nothing's perfect, but you know, we do everything we can in planning to kind of make it perfect.
Well, what I'm taking away is that you need to be transparent about your budget and what you want and everything. So be transparent. And then make sure you do planning. And if you have any questions about renovations or custom home builds, or you want to, you know, see which one you should do, maybe you're like me and you're like, I don't know what I want to do. Go see them. They're great. So thank you guys for talking through renovations and custom builds. That was fun and
a lot of talking.
A lot of talking.
Yeah, that was a lot.
Mouth is
Sorry.
tired now.
Thank you for watching.